So, a few days ago, before the mess hit the fan and the governor of the state of Virginia and the mayor of the town of Charlottesville decided to order the police not to do their job, and as a result, one person got murdered by a nutcase, and the nation started to lose its mind over whether we should have free speech or not. Back up, before all that happened, Lee Stranahan did a podcast, an epic podcast, about the history of the Black Panthers. And in it, he goes over a lot of interesting information, and he did what all journalists should do, and probably all interested citizens should do, which is archival research and looking at primary source documents. He also went a step further by actually interviewing some of the people who were involved in the early history of the Black Panthers, the original Black Panthers. So, one good thing that he always does is tell people, tell his listeners to go and verify, look it up for yourself. So I did. The Library of Congress has an interview with Aaron Dixon, who was the kingpin, lead mafioso of the Seattle Black Panther Party. Not necessarily a founding member of the Black Panther Party, but an important guy and a fairly early member who knew all of the founding members and worked closely with them, etc., etc. So it's a 2.5 hour long interview that was done, I presume, by some kind of graduate student who was being paid on a federal program to go do this research for the Library of Congress. So more than likely, your tax dollars were used to help go and pick up this interview. Now, I encourage you to go listen to it because you'll probably be shocked at what you hear. The section that I've pulled out specifically has to do with the Black Panthers admitting, Aaron Dixon, admitting that his team of Black Panthers in Seattle carried out a campaign of sniping and firebombing against police officers. Now, I have read not too long ago about the riots in 1967 and 1968, and particularly leftist scholarly narratives in which they say that no sniping ever occurred. It didn't happen. It was a figment of racist police imagination, and it led to the police shooting at black people. Now, they really go into a lot of detail in this source that I'm talking about, not this video, but in a book that I read, and if you direct message me, I'll tell you the name of the book. But they go into big detail talking about how sniping didn't occur. And the Kerner Commission, which was the federal government's appointed group of people who came up with the conclusion that racist whites lead to riots in which black people burn down cities and destroy property and people get killed, that whites were responsible for that in the 60s and probably now too. They said no sniping occurred. Now, put that together with this Black Panther telling you that he did sniping. He was the leader of the Black Panthers in Seattle. He said, we did a sniping campaign and a firebombing campaign. Then the interviewer asks him, well, why didn't you guys negotiate with the police? Why couldn't there be a negotiation and have a nonviolent resolution of your problems? And the Black Panther says there wasn't going to be any negotiation. We weren't willing to do that. So put that together with the anti-fascist problems that we're having right now. These people do not want to negotiate. They are going to use violent tactics, and the establishment left is always going to cover for them. You see it. It's happening right now. This is the same shit that was going on in the 60s, and it's back. It never really left. I mean, the violence kind of calmed down, but we're going through a cyclical pattern. This has all happened before. So do what Stranahan tells you and go look at this stuff for yourself. That way, when you have to confront someone who's lying to the rest of the public, you know your stuff. You know the material. You've seen it yourself. And also, let me just point out again before we start the video, this is your tax dollars interviewing a former domestic terrorist who admits to shooting at police, burning down the property of people because of their race, perhaps because they thought they were racist, but it's total vigilante justice. Can you imagine if the Library of Congress went and had a friendly, sympathetic graduate student from a university interviewing a former KKK member who was calmly sitting there talking about attempted lynchings or cross burnings or whatever, and that this was thought to be a great part of white American history. So just, it's always helpful to say, let's reverse the roles here and see if this makes sense. And I submit to you that this is a completely unfair, unegalitarian, biased leftist narrative that has created a situation in which this can be done with your tax money. This guy should have been in jail forever for what he did, rather than at large and hanging out, getting interviewed, and this stuff's supposed to be something people look up to. So without further ado, here we go. This is Aaron Dixon, and I'll have the link in the description. Thanks.
And so there was a lot of firebombing and turning over police cars. At midnight, they decided to let me go. So they let me go at midnight. I'm picked up by some Panthers.
Did they think that might calm things down?
I thought they thought it would calm things down. So, but I get out at midnight. They're still rioting down at Garfield, and they got the streets all blocked off and helicopter flying. And so I get to my mother's house, and there's some Panthers there. It's about 8, 10, 12 Panthers. Everybody's got their rifles and guns, and they want to go down to Garfield and engage the enemy. And so they're trying to convince me, and so I give in and say, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and go down there. So we try to make it down there on foot. Helicopter spots us and shines a light on us. One of the Panthers shoots the light out, and pretty soon we know that the area is going to be surrounded by police. There's somebody out there who we know. He calls us into his house, and just as we got into his house, the area is surrounded by police. And so this kind of really kicks off a war between the Black Panther Party and the Seattle Police Department. And so we go on a campaign of sniping and firebombing, and we're sniping at the police, and pretty soon the Madrona Hill, we call it gets the name of Pork Chop Hill, which is a Korean battle in Korea. And police at night, they don't come up there unless they're 3 cars deep, and 4 men in a car and their rifle shotguns hanging out the window. This is how tense it's gotten. And so this goes on all through that whole summer of '68, and all across the country, you got people shooting at police, you got riots, you got people attacking police stations. It's almost like the revolution had come that summer.
Now, did the police ever reach out and try and negotiate with you, or through a more peaceful way, or was it just
that wasn't going to happen, because we weren't going to sit down and negotiate with them.
Okay.